Chapter 25. The chapter about monastics. Restraint is good in every way. A group of monks argued about which sense door was the hardest to restrain. The Buddha told them that in a previous life they were unable to restrain their senses and were devoured by an ogress. He then taught them these verses as the way to attain release from suffering. 360, 361. Restraint of eye is good. Restraint of ear is good. Restraint of nose is good. Restraint of tongue is good. Restraint of body is good. Restraint of speech is good. Restraint of mind is good. Restraint is always good. A monastic who is restrained everywhere is free from suffering. The true monastic. Two friends retired from the world and became monks together. One day after bathing, they saw two geese flying through the air, and one of the monks said he could hit one of the geese in both eyes and threw a pebble which hit its mark and brought the goose down. When the Buddha heard about it, he taught them a Jataka about a scrupulous layman and taught them further with this verse. 362. One who controls his hands, controls his feet, controls his speech, controls the mind supreme, with delight, composure, solitary, content. That one is called a monastic. The monastic who speaks well. Venerable Pāḷi once spent the rains retreat with the two chief disciples, but was not honored as they were, and then went about abusing them, saying they were full of defilements. The Buddha tried to restrain him, but he fell into the underworld. The Buddha then explained how a monk should behave with this verse. 363. That monastic who controls mouth, who speaks well and who is modest, who explains the meaning of the Dhamma, his speech is surely sweet. Find pleasure in the Dhamma. When Venerable Dhamma Rama heard the Buddha declare his intention to finally pass away in 4 months' time, rather than attend on the Buddha, he went to the forest to practice the teaching. The Buddha lauded him and said, "This is how one truly honors him," and spoke this verse. 364. The one who finds pleasure in the Dhamma, delights in Dhamma, reflects on Dhamma. The monastic who remembers Dhamma does not then abandon the good Dhamma. Put aside envy. One monk of Devadatta's faction persuaded another monk to share in the rich offerings they were receiving. Even though he disagreed with Devadatta, he joined them for food. Later, when he returned to the Buddha, he was reproved for not being content, and the Buddha taught the monks with these verses. 365. One should not despise one's own gains. Don't live envious of others. The monastic who is envious does not attain concentration. 366. Even if a monk gains little, he should not despise his gains, for even the gods will praise the one of pure life who is diligent. No fondness for mind or body. A Brahmin became well known for giving of the first fruits of the harvest before he would take his own food. One day, as he was taking his meal, the Buddha appeared at the door, and the Brahmin offered him the remainder of his meal and asked him to teach what were the characteristics of a true monk. 367. The one who does not have fondness at all for mind and body, who grieves not for what does not exist, is surely called a monastic. Make an end of suffering. After Sona Kutikana received ordination, he recited Dhamma to the Buddha, who praised him for it, which also caused the gods to rejoice. On hearing about it, Sona's mother invited her son to teach her Dhamma also, and wouldn't leave the teaching even when she heard 900 thieves had broken into her house. Seeing her piety, the thieves converted and were admitted to the Sangha. This is the teaching the Buddha gave at that time. 368. That monastic who has loving kindness, with faith in the Buddha's dispensation, should surely attain to the state of peace, the joy in the stilling of conditions. 369. Please bail out this boat, monastic. When bailed out, it will go lightly, cutting off passion and hatred. From here, one goes to Nibbana. 370. One should cut off 5, abandon 5, and then cultivate 5 more. The monastic who surmounts 5 attachments is called flood crosser. Commentarial interpretation. One should cut off the 5 lower destinations, abandon the 5 lower fetters, cultivate 5 spiritual faculties. The monastic who surmounts the attachments of passion, hatred, delusion, and conceit and views is called one who has crossed the flood. 371. Meditate, monastic. Don't be heedless. Don't let your mind swirl in the strands of desire. Don't. Heedless, swallow a hot iron ball. Do not burning cry. This is suffering. 372. There's no concentration for one without wisdom. There's no wisdom for one without concentration. The one who has both concentration and wisdom is indeed in the presence of Nibbana. 373. For the one in an empty place, a monastic with peaceful mind, there is superhuman delight from insight into true Dhamma. 374. Whoever has right mindfulness regarding mind and body gains joy and happiness, that is, the deathless state for one who knows. 375. This is the very beginning for the wise monastic in here: contentment, guarding the senses, restrained in the regulations. 376. One should resort to spiritual friends, ones of pure life, ones who are diligent. One should be of friendly disposition, one who will be skillful in his conduct, rejoicing frequently because of that. One will then make an end to suffering. Casting off defilements. 500 monks who had received instructions from the Buddha saw jasmine flowers fading away and determined to attain awakening before the flowers dropped from the stems. The Buddha projected an image of himself and gave them this teaching, after hearing which they became arhats. 377. Just as striped jasmine casts off its withered flowers, so monastics cast off all passion and hatred. The stilling of the defilements. Venerable Santakaaya was said to have been born from the womb of a lioness, and lions are renowned for the dignity of their bearing. The monks praised him in front of the Buddha for being so calm and composed. The Buddha affirmed that this is just as a monastic should be with this verse. 378. Calm in body and calm in speech. Having calmness and composure, having thrown off worldly gain, the monastic is called one at peace. Self protects the self. The poor man, Nagalakula, was ordained but became discontented and thought to return to the lay life. But finding his previous rags, he took them as a meditation subject and soon became an arhat. The Buddha confirmed it to the monks and spoke these verses. 379. By oneself one should censure self. By oneself one should be controlled. The one who guards himself, mindful, will live happily, monastic. 380. Self is the protector of self. Self is the refuge of the self. Therefore, one should restrain oneself as a merchant his noble horse. The monk who attains the state of peace. Venerable Vakali was obsessed with the Buddha's body and even gave up his meditation to spend his time gazing at the Buddha. The Buddha sent him to spend the rains retreat elsewhere, and he was on the verge of suicide when the Buddha appeared to him and his sorrow vanished. The Buddha then taught him with this verse. 381. The monk, having much happiness, with faith in the dispensation, could attain to peace, happy in the stilling of all conditions. The monk who shines forth. Venerable Anuruddha gave the young boy Sumana the going forth, and he soon became an arhat. Through his power, the novice overcame a Naga, who then became his servant. When monks who did not know who he was started making fun of the novice, the Buddha decided to let him demonstrate his power and sent him to Lake Anodata in the Himalayas to bring water. The Buddha pointed him out flying through the air and spoke this verse. 382. That young monk who is devoted to the Buddha's dispensation surely shines forth in this world like the moon that is freed from a cloud.